Welcome to the Heartbeat Podcast, your trusted source for the latest breakthroughs and insights in cardiology. Here, we uncover the science behind every beat, bringing you cutting-edge research, expert discussions, and innovative approaches to heart health. Whether you're a medical professional, a curious learner, or someone passionate about understanding the heart's complexities, you're in the right place. So let's dive into today's episode and explore the pulse of modern cardiology together.
All right, get ready, because today we're going deep into the world of some pretty cutting-edge heart procedures. So picture this. You've got a medical breakthrough, can seriously improve your life.
Right.
But the catch, open heart surgery.
Yeah.
Now, what if I told you there might be another way? Less invasive, potentially just as effective, but with fewer risks.
Sounds promising.
That is exactly what we're digging into today.
Okay.
You sent over a fascinating research article from the New England Journal of Medicine. Transcatheter repair versus mitral valve surgery for secondary mitral regurgitation.
Wow.
It's all about the MATTERHORN trial, the study they did in Germany comparing two different ways to treat a pretty serious heart condition.
This is the one that's really been generating a lot of buzz, right? I mean, the implications of this trial are huge.
Oh, absolutely. I think this deep dive is going to be packed with insights for anyone, interested in heart health or even just fascinated by the latest and greatest in medicine.
For sure.
So, okay, let's break it down for our listeners a bit. What exactly is secondary mitral regurgitation? What's actually happening inside the heart when someone has this?
All right, so imagine your heart is like a house, right?
Okay.
And the mitral valve, that's a door between two really important rooms.
Makes sense.
Now, this door, it's supposed to close tightly, so everything stays where it should be.
Right.
But in secondary mitral regurgitation, the door doesn't quite close all the way, and things start leaking back through. This forces the heart to work harder and can eventually lead to things like, heart failure. And the secondary part, that means the leak isn't because the door itself is faulty. It's because the walls of the house, in this case, the heart muscle, they've become weakened.
So it's like a leaky valve.
Exactly.
And that leak is putting extra strain on the heart.
You got it.
How common is this leaky door situation?
It's more common than you might think, especially as we age.
Right.
Often goes hand in hand with other heart issues, coronary artery disease, past heart attacks.
So if someone's dealing with this condition, what are their options? What can be done about this leaky valve?
Well, traditionally, open heart surgery has been the go-to solution.
Big surgery.
Exactly. That either repair the leaky valve or, replace it altogether.
That's pretty intense. What could go wrong with open heart surgery?
Well, I mean, it's a major surgery, right? So there are inherent risks like bleeding, infection, and the recovery time can be quite long. Mm-hmm. This is especially concerning for patients who are, already weakened by heart failure.
Right. Makes sense. So then this transcatheter edge-to-edge repair came along as like a potential alternative, a less invasive option.
Yes, exactly. So picture this. A tiny catheter threaded through a vein in the leg all the way up to the heart.
Wow.
And they use a special device, it's called a MetraClip, to basically clip the leaflets of the mitral valve together, reducing the leak.
Okay. That already sounds way less intimidating than open heart surgery. But I'm guessing there was a catch.
Well, yeah, up until now, there wasn't really a head-to-head comparison with surgery to really definitively prove how effective it was.
Right.
So doctors and patients, they faced a tough decision. The proven but riskier surgery.
Right.
Or the less invasive but less studied transcatheter repair.
I see.
And this is where the MATTERHORN trial comes in.
Okay, this is the big reveal. How did this less invasive procedure measure up against traditional surgery?
The results were actually pretty impressive. They found that transcatheter repair, it performed just as well as surgery.
Really?
Yeah, when it came to preventing a whole bunch of negative outcomes, we're talking death, hospitalization for heart failure, needing repeat procedures, getting a heart assist device, or having a stroke, all within 1 year.
Wow. So even though it's less invasive, it was just as effective as surgery at preventing those serious complications.
Technically speaking, the results showed transcatheter repair to be non-inferior to surgery.
Non-inferior.
Meaning it wasn't worse by a certain predetermined margin. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The safety outcomes.
Ah.
This is where transcatheter repair really shined.
Safer, huh? Like, how much safer are we talking?
Well, the trial found a 60% lower risk of major complications.
60%?
Yeah, within 30 days for the patients who had the transcatheter repair. And this benefit, it actually continued throughout the whole year.
Well, a 60% reduction in risk. That's not just a statistic. That's potentially life-changing for people. What sorts of complications did they see less of with the transcatheter repair?
Things like major bleeding, new onset atrial fibrillation, that's an irregular heart rhythm, can lead to stroke and other problems. And even stroke itself. All of those were significantly lower in the transcatheter group compared to the folks who had surgery.
Okay, so less invasive and safer. But did it actually work as well as surgery at fixing that leaky valve?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer is yes. Both treatments were highly effective in reducing how severe that mitral regurgitation was. A really impressive percentage of patients in both groups saw their mitral regurgitation decrease to a mild or moderate level after a year.
So both fixed the leak. One just did it with way fewer risks.
Exactly.
That's pretty incredible. But, beyond just the hard data, I'm wondering, did the trial look at all at quality of life for the patients after the procedures? Because what good is a successful procedure if you don't feel well afterwards?
You're absolutely right. Quality of life is huge. And they used two different measures to assess this. The Minnesota Living with Heart Failure questionnaire, which looks at how heart failure impacts daily life, and the New York Heart Association functional class, which measures how severe the heart failure symptoms are.
Okay.
Both groups showed improvements in these measures, so they were feeling better overall after the procedure.
So both groups felt better, regardless of the procedure. That's good to hear. Now, I know no study is perfect.
Yeah.
So what were some limitations of the MATTERHORN trial that we should keep in mind?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that the patients in this trial, they were considered high risk for surgery, but they might have been lower risk overall compared to other studies or real-world scenarios.
Okay.
So these findings, they might not apply to every single patient with secondary mitral regurgitation.
That's a good point. Anything else?
Well, because it's impossible to blind patients and surgeons to what type of procedure they're getting or performing, there's always a chance that expectations could have influenced the results.
Right.
Although the researchers did use standardized protocols and a central analysis of the data to try and minimize that.
So there's always the potential for a little bias to creep in.
Yeah.
What about the fact that, this trial took place over a number of years? Did that have any impact?
That's a great point. During the trial, newer versions of that MitraClip device and new surgical techniques, they became available.
Right, yeah.
So the results might not perfectly reflect the most up-to-date procedures.
Makes sense. Medical technology is always changing and evolving. So taking all of this together, what does it mean for patients facing this tough decision?
Well, I think the MATTERHORN trial provides some really strong evidence that for patients with heart failure and secondary mitral regurgitation who are at high risk for surgery, transcatheter edge-to-edge repair is a safe and effective alternative. Mm-hmm. That striking reduction in safety risks, combined with how effective it is, makes a very compelling case for considering transcatheter repair as the initial treatment for these patients.
So this trial could potentially change how doctors approach treating this condition.
I think so. It really challenges this long-held belief that surgery is always the best way to go. And it opens up new possibilities for patients who might not be good candidates for surgery or who would just prefer a less invasive approach.
That's exciting. This trial focused on patients at high surgical risk. But I'm thinking, what about patients who were considered good candidates for surgery? Could this change things for them too?
That's a great question. And while this trial didn't specifically look at that group of patients, the safety and effectiveness data from the transcatheter repair, it really raises an interesting possibility.
Yeah.
Could it eventually become the preferred treatment option for a wider range of patients? It's certainly something that needs more research.
It's fascinating to think about the potential ripple effects of this research and how it might shape the future of heart care.
Absolutely.
But for our listeners who are maybe, facing this decision right now, what does this all mean for them?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is to be informed and to have those open and honest conversations with your doctor about all the options available. This trial shows us that there may be less invasive, equally effective ways to address this condition. And knowing that can really empower patients to advocate for the best possible care for themselves.
Yeah, it's so important for people to feel like they're an active part of those conversations with their doctors. I think this deep dive has been really eye-opening.
I agree.
And I bet our listeners are feeling a lot more knowledgeable about mitral valve treatment and kind of what the future holds.
Yeah, I hope so. The MATTERHORN trial really is, it's a great example of how medical innovation, is always pushing those boundaries and creating new and better options for patients.
Oh, for sure. So let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture here. What does this trial tell us about kind of the direction of cardiology and how we treat heart conditions?
That's a good question. I think it highlights a trend we're seeing more and more in medicine. Moving towards less invasive procedures whenever possible,
right,
without obviously compromising effectiveness.
Of course, yeah.
And this trial is a perfect example of that. It also really emphasizes the importance of patient-centered care, taking into account not just the clinical data, but also how those treatments impact people's lives, on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just about, fixing the problem. It's about helping people live better, fuller lives.
Exactly. And I think this also really underscores how important ongoing research is.
Right.
The MATTERHORN trial gave us some really valuable insights, but it also brings up some new questions.
Yeah.
And those questions are going to drive further research, lead to even better treatments down the road.
So much to be hopeful about.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
I would say if you're facing a heart health challenge, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, ask questions, explore all your options. The landscape of medical care is always evolving, and staying informed can make all the difference.
Couldn't agree more. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for walking us through this fascinating research and what it means for the future of heart care.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope you found this information helpful and empowering. Until next time, stay curious.
Thank you for tuning in to the Heartbeat Podcast, where we uncover the science behind every beat. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform to stay updated with our latest discussions and insights. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, feedback, or questions, and let's continue exploring the pulse of modern cardiology together. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep your heart healthy.